Here's a quick look into today's episode.
So when you ask what kind of impact that parents have on the success of their children, what can military families bring to the fabric of your community, it really speaks to parents who are engaged in the lives of their children can do to help them become successful. And there's 3 pillars in the Greek temple of leader development: education, training, and experience. We train for the known, the problems we know we're going to have to solve. Education is to help us to solve problems that we don't know we have yet, or are unknown or unknowable. And then experience is what we gain along the way. And it's all on a bedrock of character, right? So you want to do it the right way. The experience that you gain through education, which is what the leader professional development session is really rich and really valid. And again, I think the fact that it's repeatable makes it even more important. I'd go to the priorities in this theater: people, partnerships, and prevail. We're a people-centric service. We don't put people on equipment. We put equipment on people. It's eyeball-to-eyeball contact. It's the human interaction between human beings that gets things done in the Army. We've always had partners and allies at our side in the business of defending our country and our way of life, and that won't change. 36 countries, 18 time zones, 52% of the Earth's surface, 60% of the Earth's population, 25% of the Earth's landmass. Despite this theater being characterized by water, people are essential, and the partnerships are vital because 2 out of every 3 chiefs of defense in this region are Army officers. Because some of our partners don't even have navies or air forces, and if they do, they're small. So the relationships that we develop over time matter, and it has to happen early. It can't be after we cross the line of departure. Now I'm trying to figure out whether I can trust you. It is way too late. So we have to build those relationships on a bedrock of trust through our operations, activities, and investments across the theater. Operation pathways. Deploy units forward with partners and allies at the invitation of sovereign governments to train together to address any threats that are necessary, so we assure allies and deter adversaries across this region. And for us, as the guardians of freedom, as the folks who defend our nation and our way of life and that of our allies and partners, that is what we are uniquely educated and trained to do and resourced to do. So we must prevail. There is no other choice.
Welcome to another episode of Teach Me to Fish, where our purpose is to help leaders better understand what drives people. In today's world, the core of recruiting and retaining talent revolves around leadership. And not just average leadership, but motivated, values-based, inspirational leadership. Our purpose is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories and stacking habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people.
You know, when I thought about why I wanted to do this, why would you get Ron Clark and why would we bring you on? Because when I thought about you, you've told so many stories throughout our time together, and you've led through stories. You are what you say you are. And when I thought about this, I thought about what is our purpose in life, right? And I thought about have you found your purpose in life? Have people found their purpose in life? And some people, it's clear that they have, and then some people, they're still looking for it. And what I said to those people is imagine if you knew what God put you on this earth for, or imagine if you knew what you were put on this earth to do, and how good you might be at whatever it is you're doing, if that. So when I thought about that, who is Ron Clark, and what do you want people to think when they hear your name?
Person who leads from the heart and with integrity, with the intent of being of service to others. That's always been what's driven me. It's why I joined the Army. It's why I've stayed in the Army. And it's really, I'd hope, on display every day. The stories are really just a vehicle. And part of that is it helps people understand and contextualize how you think and what your experience has been that helps them then understand how you think about challenges or opportunities that they may face.
Yeah. And when we talked about a little bit, like what do we think the whole conversation was about? I thought about it's about that purpose in our life, and the North Star. You use the words people-centric, and you use the words like, I want to feel like I belong. And you said something a couple weeks ago at the Commanders Conference. You said you always start off with thanks.
Right.
What did you mean by that? Like you always start off with thanks.
I found this by accident. When I was a battalion commander, we were in a pretty intense series of engagements, kinetic engagements in Ramadi. This was the spring of 2006. Lots of contact, multiple units in contact at one time. You're trying to piece together as a commander where you can apply, in this case, combat power to help your organizations that are in the fight. And what started to make more sense to me than what I'd experienced and what a lot of us experience in the Army is your commander calling you for a sit rep. Sit rep over. Sit rep.
Yeah.
Tell me what's going on. I don't know what's happening because you're not telling me. Well, they are telling you. If they have the freedom to be able to speak to one another in a crosstalk, your commanders, subordinate commanders, are crosstalking on your radio net. So every time someone would report something to me, just inherently I would say thanks out as the response to that. At the end of that evening, and we were in contact for this particular fight for about 18 hours. At the end of it, my operations NCO, Master Sergeant Morehouse, walks into the TOC from an alternate location where he was monitoring a fight while he was not on shift. And he comes in and he goes, sir, every time you came on the net, it's like the temperature went down. Everybody got more calm, and everybody felt more empowered to talk because you thanked them for reporting their situation in contact. What that did was it made people want to report.
Yeah. Report more.
I want to talk to you because you value what I'm saying. So now every time you send me an email, the first word is thanks. Because I want you to tell me what you think is important and what I can do to help you either solve problems or to grip an opportunity that's presented itself.
Yeah. Well, so I can tell you that feeling that you're hoping for, and that feeling that people get when they hear, your name, or when they hear you kind of key up on the mic, like I personally, like I can feel that, and I can see it from a lot of our teammates that they feel like they can be honest, they can say what they're thinking.
And Matt, fundamentally it's because of the way I think about the challenges we face. As a subordinate commander, your challenges are mine. I mean, I have the same problem, probably not as acute as you, but anything that you're facing right now, because I'm in it with you, I'm facing as well. And I'm facing those challenges or gaining opportunities from other subordinate commanders at the same time. So my ability to be able to make you understand in the heat of the moment that you're not telling me something that's going to make me angry or going to challenge what I think about you as a leader. What I'm going to try to do first is help you solve that problem.
Yeah.
Or help you, leverage, whatever resource we need to gain an opportunity. So that's really what it's about.
Yeah. My first interaction, the first ever interaction I had with you, I'd seen you in pictures and stuff like that, and heard about you
thought I was taller.
through reputation. But was when me and Christy were getting ready to move out here to Hawaii to take command of the Rattlesnakes, and it was the change of command date was in flux, and it was going to happen before the kids graduated from school and before we sent Hunter to college and all those things. And I remember, like, it has to get the division commander to approve of a shift, and that makes a lot of people nervous, right? You wonder, should you even ask for something like that?
Sure.
Well, who am I to ask about that? But all of a sudden, this piece of paper shows up in my email, and it had your name at the bottom, but you wrote on it with like a pen, and it said approved. This makes the most sense for this soldier, for this family, for them to show up after graduation and do the change of command. And I'll never forget that was my first interaction with you, was that before you even knew who I was, you were thinking about that soldier and that family and what was best for the organization, to do a change of command in that way. And
that's from experience that I've had from great leaders who have thought to be thoughtful in the way they've gone about making decisions. In your case, again, it's a challenge that you're having as a family with regard to the time to move. Mm-hmm. So how do we best solve that as as a commander,
Yep.
is to look at the facts bearing on the problem and try to understand what problem we're trying to solve. And in this case, to move a change of command within 30 days, that's going to help the family better transition into the job is going to help everybody. It's going to help the unit because the transition will be smoother. It's going to help that family because you've built, as you said, some trust with that family because now you've invested in them a little bit.
Yeah.
You say, hey, look, I'm okay with you showing up at a different time if it's going to make the transition easier for you, your family, and the unit will benefit from it because all of that is interconnected. Now, that's happening across 26 battalions inside of the division. So if we can solve that one challenge, for you, we're trying to do that for everyone else at the same time and doing what's best, for those people in the Army. And, I always talk about the Army being people-centric, and it's a people-centric service. It's about human interaction.
Yeah. And, we're just kind of setting the stage here, and we're going to jump right into your story here, in a second and where we get started, but like, when you do that for people, then we do that for our folks. Like someone did that, you did that for me. I'm absolutely doing that in every way, shape, or form I can with the people that are around us, know, and it starts to work. You were telling me a story before we got started outside about all the people that were on that division staff with you.
Right.
Like they're leading in the way that you showed us and the way that they've been led, the things that work for them. And so they're trying to pay it forward and do it the same.
The promotion ceremony was to colonel from an officer who I'd served with the first time when he was a major. And the story of him talking about his peers and how they all work together and a number of them being here for his promotion to colonel, and they're all colonels or promotable to colonel. They're all pulling as they climb. They're all in the same direction. There was an additional layer of young officers who were there who they had mentored and they had coached. So to see that paid forward from those officers was really touching for me. But the neatest part about the discussion was how they solved problems by working together away from the headquarters. In some cases, there were battalion XOs, brigade S3s, officers working on the division staff who got together in their neighborhood to have conversations about working together to solve problems at the battalion, brigade, and division level that was helpful to everybody. And it built those bonds that still exist today.
Yeah.
And again, they're teaching those same lessons to the officers who are following them in the line. Very warm moment for me as a soldier that has a heck of a lot more service in uniform behind me than ahead of me to see, those officers that you invested in continue to invest in others.
Yeah. Well, why? Let's jump right into why did you choose to serve in the first place, and tell us a little bit about what made you want to be a soldier, what made you want to join the Army, and then why West Point, sir?
Sure. Grew up in an Army family. My father was a non-commissioned officer, served in the Army for 28 years, rose to the grade of Master Sergeant. My father and I were in the Army together for 4 years when I was a lieutenant, young captain. The example that he provided for me of service in uniform led me to want to be a soldier. I watched him from my earliest days lead with character, lead with integrity. My earliest memory of leader development was my father with his subordinate non-commissioned officers around our dining room table studying for the skills qualification test. And he explained to me how their performance on that test would help them with promotion and what that means for their families. It would essentially change the trajectory of their family based on them putting in the time now and him helping to coach them to do better. So it was a neat memory to have, but then to grow up in a house where service was the business. My mother was a teacher, my father, then a principal, then an administrator in our hometown, and my dad was, a soldier. So I grew up wanting to become a soldier. I joined junior ROTC in high school. I was a good student, involved in athletics, and spent some time talking to my dad about coming into the Army. And he said, hey, have you ever thought about becoming an officer? I mean, I think that, you'd be good at that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I don't even know any officers.
What age were you when it was like starting to get serious? Like serious about
15.
About 15.
About 15.
Yeah.
So he made it pretty clear to me that my parents, who didn't have the opportunity to go to college right out of high school, just based on their socioeconomic condition at the time. My parents have been saving up money since before I was born for me to go to college because they wanted me to have that opportunity. So how do you kill two birds with one stone? You know, my dad wanted me to have an education, you know, at the undergraduate level. My mom did as well. I was doing well in school because school's your job, do your job. And he set up an office call for me with his boss, who was the brigade executive officer of 2nd Brigade, 5th Infantry Division, Fort Polk, Louisiana. And this gentleman was a major promotable. He was prepositioned to take battalion command. My dad was the brigade dining facility manager. So his direct supervisor, the brigade, you know, dining facility manager, worked directly for the XO. So he had an office call set up for me. I went into the office call, meet this major. He's this larger than life kind of figure. He had graduated from Morgan State University on an ROTC 4-year scholarship, and he had taught boxing at West Point. So he talked about those experiences, talked about the commissioning sources. He included officer candidate school in that as well. And then he started asking me questions about my interests and really my qualifications for that sort of thing. And I was president of my class. I was a varsity athlete. I was a company commander at the time in junior ROTC. And I was a National Merit Scholar academically. So he said, yeah, West Point's looking for you. They're looking for you.
For people like you.
Yeah. So I said, okay. I never even thought about it. Had never even considered it. So I applied for early admission to the Air Force Academy and to West Point. I was accepted to both. So those are the only two schools I applied to for college. So I always tell people that Air Force was my safety school because obviously West Point was my number one choice. So I went to West Point on our day for the first time. Had never even visited. Just leap of faith. This is the right thing to do. Went for it. I had a girlfriend at the time who I could make the case to her why it was important to me. She said it was okay that, you know, she went off to LSU and went off to West Point, and we figured out a way to make it work. And now we've been married 35 years.
Oh man,
which is great. But my experience at West Point initially was pretty rocky. And some of that was based on the fact that I never visited. So I really didn't understand, one, why people were so bent on being mean to me. This place is great. Why is everybody unhappy? I hadn't really spent time like understanding anything other than, you know, what was written at the time about the history of West Point, which I got, but, you know, more recent history I didn't understand. So especially as a plebe, I found myself on the wrong side of some conversations quite a few times. To be, you know, totally honest, on our day, I was in formation, just kind of going over in my head the number of things they'd asked us to do over the course of the day before the big parade. Mm-hmm. And you know from your own experience, the our day parade is the same day you arrive. So they, you know, cut your hair, get you uniforms, teach you to march, you know, you run around all day long getting things issued and moving about so that you can participate in this parade for the families at the end of the day. And it's the only parade in 47 months at West Point where they reverse height order the formation. So all the short kids are in the front and the tall kids are in the back. So mom and dad can all see their own kid. On that particular day, I'm standing in formation. The parade's about to begin. I'm going over the tasks in my head over the course of the day. And I realized I hadn't drank any water, despite being told multiple times, drink water, drink water, drink water. Now I'm from Louisiana. I know water's important. It's hot down there, very humid. I was like, you know, just to be safe, because I'd seen kids pass out in formations before. Never happened to me, but I'd seen it. So I'm thinking, I don't know how long it's going to be. I should probably go drink some water. So I took 2 steps to the rear left face, exited the formation just like you're supposed to using appropriate facing movements. And I went into the sally port, into the hallway, and I'm standing at the fountain drinking water when multiple upperclassmen who are also participating in this parade, you know, all seniors, walk out and they see me drinking water, and they went apoplectic. So I've got 5 or 6 people yelling at me all at the same time. I don't know what they're saying to me. I'm kind of no excuse, because you have 4 responses. Yes, sir. No, sir. No excuse, sir. Sir, I do not understand. I didn't understand anything. People are yelling at me. And then the formation starts to move. So get outside, get in the formation. So I basically jump into the formation as it's passing into the area where all the tall kids are. So full circle moment, one of my company mates from West Point, for my promotion to 4-star and change of command to take command of USERPAC, he brought a copy of a picture of us marching on our day where every kid around me is at least a head taller. Because he goes, why are you in here with the tall guys? I was getting scuffed up right up until that formation moved out. But there's visual evidence of me not being awesome on the first day, which I learned a lot from and grew a lot from that experience, and really appreciated just the lessons in life that I learned as a cadet, and the fact that the cohort that you find yourself with is going to be with you the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's 1,000 people who all go into the same company to work.
Right.
Some leave early, some leave later, but you have that touch point of the 47-month experience plus everything after that, which, has really been one of the most important things to shape the lives and relationships that I've maintained over the course of, my entire life.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably talk about the experiences and the things that you learned from West Point for a whole hour. I feel like as we get older, we figure out what lessons we learned. They're different, right? Sure. When you probably came out that first month, first year, I just got done listening to a couple different podcasts with folks, talking to folks that are lieutenants right now that just graduated from West Point. And it's so fresh on their mind, all the things that they learned from there. And I know you'll kind of incorporate that into some of the lessons as you went. When you left West Point and you head out to the regular Army, whether it be airborne school, Ranger school, those first couple of years, what was some of the things that stand out to you the most when you first left West Point, your first kind of experience in the Army, that you still remember to this day that kind of shaped those first couple of years in the Army?
Matt, that's a great question. It goes back to even my application to West Point. I didn't understand how hard it is to get into West Point. I didn't understand as a lieutenant how hard it is to, graduate from Ranger school, how hard it is to do. Those are difficult things to do, but you're moving with your cohort, so you just think it's something I have to do. Mm-hmm. So as an example, my roommate and I decided to waive some of the mandatory leave at the end of graduation so we could go to Benning in the first IOBC class, the first Ranger course that was available, so that we could be in our units shortly after Christmas. So we tried to go as fast as we could to Fort Benning and get it going, because we didn't want the winter break from Ranger school, didn't think maybe you might recycle. That's a possibility. To the point where what we found out when we were in the basic course was that I still had to go to the Bradley Commander course because I was going to a unit that had Bradleys, which was the plan. But I didn't know that there was a Bradley Commander's course. So I'm going to have to stay at Benning anyway. So I'll have to come back. Even if I don't recycle, I still have to come back to Benning. My roommate, Lieutenant General retired Bill Burleson, did not have to come back because he was going to the 7th Infantry Division and didn't have a follow-on. So now we have an apartment that we want to keep, but he doesn't have a reason to come back, so I have to find a roommate. So I have a conversation with one of my West Point classmates. Hey, buddy, what do you think about taking Burleson's spot? We have the same course we're going to. We're going to the same unit in Germany. What do you think about, taking his spot and we keep the apartment rather than putting our stuff in storage? And he said, what if we recycle at Ranger School? And I said, request withdrawn.
You're out. You're out.
You said the R word. I'm not even considering that. You're out. So, good fortune shined on us, and Bill and I were Ranger buddies as well and graduated from the course without recycle. But looking back on that and having this, zero defect understanding, and then going back years later as cadre at the Ranger School and understanding that there are any of a number of things that could have happened, physically with patrols, on a mission that would have delayed, us doing all that. I think not having a full understanding of what could happen in terms of bad things. Ignorance is bliss in some cases. But some of the lessons I learned were the hard way because I had to figure it out along the way. A good thing that I had as a resource through all that was my dad.
Yeah.
So my dad and I were in the Army together for 4 years. So he was a great sounding board for me for what was happening to me in real time. So, hey, Dad, this happened today. And he'd go, really? That's not good. What's the explanation on that? What were you thinking? Or what did that person tell you was the reason that they did that? Or, yeah, I think you may want to reconsider that course of action and, look at it from another perspective. So some of the lessons from West Point, to your original question, the first one was about standards. And the highest standards that you can achieve as a human being is being a person of good character. So the decisions that you make are all tied to your character and integrity. And being, as clear-eyed and as true north about those things as possible. And it really has guided me throughout. And the story I'll tell you quickly is when I was a young lieutenant, I'd been in platoon leader job about 4 months. The other 2 platoon leaders in the company were newer than me. I'd sponsored both of them. During a 4-mile run, for which our company commander didn't do PT with us, never paid attention to what he's doing. I'm a platoon leader. I've got my own responsibilities. During this 4-mile run, in the first mile, he started to falter. He turns, looks at the 3 of us, and then says to me, take the company. He's about to fall out of his own run. Not because of injury or whatever. He's just out of shape. Mm-hmm. So I run the 3 or 4 steps up to where he is. I put my arm around him and I said, no, this is your company. This is your run. Slow down. We will continue to run behind you. And then I went back to my spot as a platoon leader in the front. And my PL buddy next to me, who's the best man at my wedding, my West Point classmate, Carlos Zamora, he's turned 60 later this month. He FBI agent, special agent for 25 years after his service in the Army. He says to me, I would have followed you. I said to him, that's why he didn't ask you. So we get to the company and the CO says to me, hey, thank you. I really appreciate, that you would help me. You are the best leader that I've ever encountered. You're going to go so far in the Army and in life because of the way you approach problems. At the time, I didn't understand what he was saying because I'm thinking to myself, I just didn't want the soldiers to question whether or not the officers in this formation are tough enough to hang when things get difficult. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't this grand, for the good of, this man and his leadership. And no, man, I'm just trying not to make us all look like we don't care. So it's really more of a character-based decision that I care enough to, it's the, age old, I give a damn from, former CG of the 25th ID, General Brooks. That's kind of what it was about. I care what people think about the leaders in this formation. It's not so much that, I wanted to make sure that he was fine. It was more about me caring about the soldiers in that formation, understanding that when things got tough, we'd be there. We wouldn't quit.
Yeah, you've already kind of answered a question that I was going to ask you, which is like your definition of character. And like these are hard words to like just kind of come up with a blanket definition. Instead, it's like, you think about the way that somebody with character makes you feel, and you use the word caring, you use the word empathy. When you talked about, leading with character, is there anything else that like you, from a feeling standpoint, that you think of when you say somebody with character does these things or acts like this?
Great question. One of the ways that character was explained to me is it's the decisions you make when no one's watching. Mm. When just to do the right thing, in the cadet prayer, choose the harder right over the easier wrong. That your true north is going to be true north no matter what the conditions are. And that you tend to surround yourself with people who think the same way and will take appropriate actions based on their character when they meet a crucible event. One of the things I always say to those who are retiring from service, if I officiate their retirement ceremony, is that in most cases, whenever they met a point of decision, there was a voice that they heard. It's a teacher, a coach, their parents, a former leader that they served with, a subordinate in some cases, who knew what right looked like. And from that person's experience and from them being that voice in your head, it helps you to make difficult decisions at a point in time when you face a crucible moment. And for me, I've had just a laundry list of people that I could say, in a moment of decision, what would this person do?
Yeah.
How would they approach this situation? My decision, and then sometimes you don't have a lot of time to think about it, but in the right, what is the harder right here? What is the harder right decision to make in this situation than to choose something that's lesser? So again, it's the decisions that you make a lot of times out of the, prying eyes of others that are what drive it. When nobody's checking to see if you're doing PT anymore because you're a senior person, are you still getting after it every morning at 5:30 or 6? That's a personal decision that you've got to make. It's again, it's the right thing to do. So does someone need to tell you to do that? No, it should be ingrained in you to do the right thing, especially when it affects the lives, health, safety of soldiers.
Yeah. The next kind of area is like an area of like lessons, the leadership failures, maybe along the way that we learn from, right? Sometimes we learn from a failure that we failed ourselves. And in other cases, we learn from a failure maybe that we watched kind of happening on our left and right. You told the story about the motorcycle and how that made you feel. And you said, if I'm ever in that situation, not under my watch.
Yeah. It was a situation where I had to call a leader to talk about a fatality from a motorcycle accident. And I had to call my boss. And he was one of these guys that asked the main questions. There was a fatality. Someone was killed. He was asking questions like, had they gone through the motorcycle safety course? Did they have on the proper protective gear? Was it alcohol related? Were they sleep deprived? At the time, I didn't know any of those answers because, again, it's an initial report. Initial reports are often wrong, but not generally when someone's died. So that's the fact we have. We're in the process of notifying family. We're in the process of helping a unit that's grieving because they've lost a comrade. So the feedback I gave to my boss was, I don't know any of the answers to the questions that you're asking me, but it will all be very obvious to us in due time. It's harder for me to call you to tell you we've had a fatality than it is in some cases to have the fatality, because you're going to drag us through this series of questions that, again, in the moment while units are grieving, it's inappropriate for me to call down there and ask him these questions.
Yeah.
And he, to his credit, said, "Hey, you're right. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that it was coming across that way." I go, "It absolutely is. And I just ask for your patience." And it was fine. It didn't wreck our relationship. In fact, I think it made it stronger because I made a decision in real time to help him understand what his actions were in that moment and what it meant to us. I mean, we're all grieving. Again, the challenges that our units and our soldiers and our subordinate leaders face are ours. So he wasn't in it with us at that point. He became in it with us after that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that story because it's impactful that every time I've heard you tell it. Are there any ones where you personally felt like you failed or you came up short and then you used that as a tool going forward throughout your career and you said, okay, I made this mistake and I'm going to share it with people. You might make this mistake too, but at least we'll make it together.
Sure. I had a boss at one point who I didn't think cared enough about what we were doing. So I made it a personal mission in error, try to involve him in things to make him do better. Not that I'm judging him on, what kind of boss he is. I just don't think he's as invested in this as he should be in what we're doing. So I would find opportunities to try to move his behavior into actions that I thought he should take as my boss in whatever that moment in time was, which was wrong. I should have been a better subordinate to him. In other words, I should have had a conversation with him to say, hey, boss, this is what I think. And here's my perception of what you do. Help me understand if I'm right or wrong. He's my boss. He gets to do it. It's not illegal, unethical, or moral. I just don't value the way he's going about the business of leading the formation that my subordinate formation is a part of. Arrogant on my part, not helpful to him or my adjacent units, brothers and sisters, by poking my boss to try to make him do better. There are other ways that I could have been a better subordinate leader to him and to help him understand what we needed as subordinate commanders from him without pushing him and using, shame as a method, if you will. So the lesson out of that was he gets to be my boss. I don't get to pick him. And I sure as heck don't get to tell him how he's supposed to go about his business. What I have to do is present information to him to help him understand what my organization's feeling and going through and how I believe we can best get inside of his intent, his guidance, his vision for how this should go forward. And if it's not aligned, to have the conversation about alignment. And once he says, hey, look, I just don't think you're right, or I think you're absolutely wrong, then if it's not illegal, unethical, or moral, we got to move in the direction of travel that this leader has taken us. And I face situations after that where I had disagreements with bosses or with subordinates and just said, hey, here's the reason why we're doing this. Because a lot of that is just due to really a lack of understanding of the intent 2 levels down, which doctrinally we're supposed to have. If I don't understand the why of what it is we're doing, then it's going to be more difficult for me to get to whatever the intent of this operation, mission, task is, because I don't get it. I mean, it's good to explain, your why, and doctrinally we're supposed to do that anyway. So if you don't know, that's the time to, raise your hand and say, hey, boss, I have a RFI, request for information. Is this what you're asking me to do? If the answer is yes, it is, and I disagree with what it is we're doing, there's a time and a way to do that. And it should be in private, in a way that engenders the trust that you've built with that person to be able to get your point across in a way that's not viewed inappropriately or wrong.
Yeah. I think communication, a lot of people think communication works one way. It's you communicating down and telling people what to do. And there's just as much communication going up.
Oh, yeah.
Especially as you become a little bit more senior, right? Like if someone's asking you a bunch of questions, chances are you have failed to communicate ahead of time so that they didn't have those questions kind of in the first place. And that's a lot easier said than done from a communication standpoint. In order to be a good subordinate, you gotta communicate up as well. And and there's not a lot of doctrine or there's not a lot of time to teach people how to do that along the way. We kind of find people that are just, this person's a good communicator versus this person's not. And I put that into my bucket of, we're always learning. We're always kind of trying to get a little bit better every day. And as we get a little bit older, communication is one of those areas. What have you found from a communication standpoint as you've gotten older and more senior, helped you in the communication, whether it's up or down with communication?
I'm a much better listener now. And you sat in a lot of meetings with me. I generally talk last, and I ask people what they think without penalty or consequence. And the whole point in that is it's the wisdom of the crowd, right? And it's the saying that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yes.
So there are people who will have perspectives, that will have input, that will provide feedback, that have information that can help you with, the process of making a decision. But if you stifle, that communication or stifle initiative because you didn't have, the ability to be an active listener and understand what people are telling you and discern what they're not telling you. Because that's another piece of this, what's happening, what's not happening, and why. So I think I've become a better listener over time. And some of that is, some people listen to respond, not to discern or understand. And I think as a younger officer, and even as a husband and a father, I would listen to respond as opposed to listening to, understand and to try to empathize and make a better decision based on, more credible information, because I took a beat and paused and actually listened to what someone was telling me.
Yeah. You just said the word family, right? And before we go into kind of the next area of
Sure.
like long-term service, talk about how at what point did your family start to become in your calculus when it came to everything that you were doing? Because now you just said at the end of the day, you go home and now you're dad,
Oh, yeah.
and you're going to communicate with your family. This is probably about the point in your career where family's starting to become a part of your thinking, your thought process on either what assignments you take, how much longer you stay at work,
Right.
what you say when you go home, when you go to work and such.
Yeah, Simona and I were married 2 years after I came in the Army. It was important that I offer that. And some of it's because we came to the collective decision that it was best that I learned how to be a grown up before being married. I'd never cooked, done laundry. I mean, I went to West Point at 17. So I went from my parents to the academy, and I'd never even foraged for my own food. So I had to learn how to be a grown up first. So we got married 2 years after I'd been in the Army. The first year I was gone 10 out of the first 12 months with the train up for Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then the deployment. So we were stationed in Germany at the time. We spent our first anniversary in Paris. We took a trip post-deployment to Paris. It was wonderful. Our second anniversary was in labor and delivery at Martin Army Hospital at Fort Benning. So our son was born on our second anniversary. So when you ask when did it become about family, it became about family when I got married. It became really about family once we had children. So my kids are 2 years apart, and right now they're 33 and 31. One's an attorney and the other is a medical doctor. The understanding of importance of being present as a dad really hit home for me when I was a young captain in a 25th Infantry Division. I had a bunch of hobbies. I'm trying to learn, how to be a triathlete, and I'm paddling, doing outrigger stuff, and I'm, doing playing golf, and I'm doing all these things. And my kids at the time were small. So it seemed like there wasn't a lot of time with dad because I had a bunch of other things I was doing with friends and with colleagues. And, my wife basically said, hey man, we need you here when you're not working. It's important. So back then, a lot of golf being played in the military. Yeah. Business golf, if you will. My boss, when I was the commanding general's aide in the 25th ID, played business golf. People would show up here. President of the United States showed up here, wanted to play golf. So they played Leilahua, and, he was in a foursome with the President of the United States. So during those times, I would go home, jump on trampoline with my kids, go for a run with them in the double jog stroller, just go sit at the park, watch them play on the jungle gym. And it became the norm. So my wife and I, were present in the lives of our kids because they became our hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, if you love to hunt, better be a deer stand for 4.
Yeah.
And if you love to golf, it should be 4 of us, on the course. And then their activities become the things that you're involved in, whether it's coaching my son in Little League, helping my wife coach my daughter in soccer, not knowing anything about soccer, but knowing about parents of athletes, right, and going, hey, you're either in the fence or outside, don't coach your kid from the bleachers. So it's always been that we've been actively involved in the activities that our kids were involved in, and that became what we were doing. And it really proved successful as they continue to get older and be, more successful in athletics, academics, and other endeavors. And we were in it with them, which is neat.
Yeah, you were planting the seed at a very young age with your kids. They're obviously very successful now, but there's a whole decade, or two of you guys being present and helping them. There's a couple other stories that we'll talk about, like, where that came. Now, I'm a huge believer in that. Sure. The best way to be with your kids is to be there with them at practice. Yeah. And the best way to dictate when practice schedule is to be the coach. Because right. Then you get to make coach. Like, that's right. In Vicenza, when I was battalion XO, I made practice at 1800, right there on post. Yeah. And so my boys would show up to the office. That means we're on the clock, and then we would walk across the street to the gym, and then we would run practice, and you be the coach. And so you're right there with them, not just showing up for the game. I'm a huge fan of showing up for practice and not just the game, because if you show up for the game and you ask coach, why is my kid not playing? Well, if you'd been at practice, you'd have seen why the kids are not playing.
Yeah, Matt, good story that I don't tell much. But when I was a young lieutenant, my first sergeant asked me, my buddy Carlos, and his platoon sergeant, Fred Young, to help him coach Little League because they needed more coaches. His son wanted to play. They didn't have enough coaches to form enough teams. So he signed up to coach, not being a baseball guy, and asked us if we could help him. While we're out there coaching Little League, one of the coaches from another team from the next concern over, we were at Kirschgoins, this is Friedberg. So 1st Brigade, 3rd Armored Division, 3rd Brigade, 3rd Armored Division. So this team from Friedberg had my former English professor at West Point, who was a field grade, coaching his kids in Little League. And I just remember thinking, what a great example. He's a fantastic leader. I know that because he was, he was my plebe English teacher. But watching him as a field grade officer with his children on the field, coaching them in Little League, that's the kind of officer I want to be. That's the kind of dad that I want to be, present in the lives of my kids, because it's the right picture. My dad coached me growing up. And so the major who was coaching his kids was General Dempsey. It was Martin Dempsey, who became the chairman of the former chief of staff of the Army and chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. So yeah, it's the people who are doing things right in their personal lives are probably doing it okay at work too, if they're applying the same kind of due diligence to all of it.
Yeah. Amen. Like when you talk about someone shows up to church and they got a bunch of kids and they're either crazy rowdy or they're in line. Yeah. And you think about is that the person that should be in charge of 120 people, or if they got this in order, will they also be able to kind of keep something else in order or something? That's something we don't often say, people are looking at, but we're absolutely keeping our eye on, on how you're doing that. The next kind of area is longer term service. Okay. So that we're probably at this point now in your career where you're lieutenant colonel time and you tell a story. It's one of my favorites about you were preparing to retire. Yeah. Right. And you had to make a decision at this point based on a couple things. Right. Am I going to do this long term or have we achieved everything that we're looking for? I think this is when you're probably at West Point. It was. And if I get it right, department that you were working in, the ethic department.
Yep. Simon Center for the Professional Military Ethic.
So can you tell us about first start off with when did it start going into your head? I've probably culminated with the Army. This is about where we see ourselves kind of doing something outside the Army, right? And why that kind of went into your head, and then off we go.
Thanks for that, Matt. The Army gets a vote. So in some cases, promotions and selections, don't go the way that you believe it should go. And for us, that moment was when I was not selected for brigade command. So I was a colonel. You can have a 30-year career, but if you're not going to command at the next level, that any promotion beyond that is not going to happen, that the opportunity doesn't exist. At the time, my daughter was a nationally ranked high school pole vaulter. She was, I think, 4 or 6 in the country, was being recruited by everybody from Harvard to Oregon to LSU to Vanderbilt, and everybody in between. So I competed for command the second year, and I was selected. So then the question becomes, okay, do you want to move your daughter as a senior in high school, who's a 2-time state champ in New York in pole vault, and she's nationally ranked as a hurdler as well. She's currently training in the best pole vault club in the country, the Hudson Valley Flying Circus, where on a given night, the state champions from Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York are all training together. Where she went from being 10-3 vaulter to being a 13-3 vaulter in 18 months, which huge difference some collegiate vaulters never vault 13 feet. So do you move your daughter out of this, perfect scenario for her going into her college decisions, or to take an opportunity to command in Fort Benning, or do you just go, you know what, this has been awesome. It's been a great run. The Army didn't pick me the first time to do this. So what's my potential like beyond that? Don't know. But do we want to uproot our family at a moment in time where we know we're making a positive change here? We know we're doing some positive things at West Point, and we're having a great experience there with cadets and with staff and faculty. So we had a conversation like we did about most things. We sat down with Megan. We said, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And she said, I want you to be able to chase your dreams while I chase mine. It's cool. I'll just be the state champion in Georgia. So it's okay. Pretty confident she can do that. Let's go. The only challenge is we're moving to Fort Benning. She's going to go to Columbus High School, which is college preparatory magnet high school. And they don't have a track. They don't have a pole vault coach. They don't have pole vault pit. So what are we doing? Well, my wife gets certified to safely coach pole vault. Goes on to make a deal with one of the other high schools that has the facilities, and coaches kids from 4 different high schools in Columbus to pole vault, and took 6 kids to the state championship meet, where Megan was the outstanding athlete of the state meet, where she set the state meet record in pole vault with her mom as her coach. So when you ask what kind of impact do parents have on the success of their children, what can military families bring to the fabric of your community, that's a pretty extreme example, but it really speaks to parents who are engaged in the lives of their children can do to help them become successful. She goes on to earn a full ride to Duke University, which is her dream school. She goes to Duke, where she still holds the ACC record for outdoor women's pole vault. She graduated from Duke in 2016. So for 10 years, that record has stood. She competed professionally for 5 years, Olympic trials finalist twice, competed, around the world in pole vault. Now she's a medical doctor. But all of that was facilitated in the early part, and the conditions were set by her mom. Supported by me, because, you can't run a pole vault pit by yourself. So I'm out there moving the standards and catching the bars and setting the bars and moving the poles. And my sergeant major's out there with me, helping out because he loved it. And so, yeah, Clyde Glenn, great teammate. So it was good, and it turned out great. But again, I think the moral of the story, without Olympic trials and state championships and all that, is that there are parents in every community where our soldiers and families live that are doing something to enrich their community, whether it's in community service, whether it's in the schools, whether it's in athletics, whatever it is, the communities are better for the time and talents that our soldiers and their families put into it. And it's really the goodness of living in a military community, which I have for all of my life. That's, where my parents volunteered to help out in everything I did, and my sister did, and we've tried to do the same for our own children.
Yeah, and it's not just when we say the community, I don't just think of the community outside the gate, it's the communities inside the gate. And so like the other families benefit from those coaches, from the people signing up, from the people that are, doing the same things. Like I'm sure you did very similar things with your son as he was growing up.
Oh, absolutely.
So being involved in his life with the things that he was doing, there was other kids, whether they're coming in the back door, playing in the backyard, so we often say like it takes a tribe to raise these kids.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure you guys were part of raising other people's kids.
Another quick story. We were stationed in Atlanta at Fort McPherson back when that post was open. Force Com headquarters and 3rd Army and Army Reserve Command were at Fort Mac at the time. We signed up for Little League in the community, because it's in the inner city of Atlanta. So a lot of families that are not nuclear families with 2 parents and 1 parent homes, and folks are working and just don't have time in a lot of cases to both make ends meet and to support their children's activities. I helped to coach a little league team that had 14 boys where only 2 dads were present at activities.
Yeah.
You contrast that with having been at Fort Leavenworth at CGSC, where you've got 14 boys and 14 dads at every practice.
Yeah.
At every Cub Scout meeting, at every dance recital, at you name the event, it's built for community. And we tend to have these nuclear families for the most part in the military. So you look at it as normal, but it's actually a blessing. So in this case, 14 boys, 2 dads. So Matt befriended a number of these young men, and they would come home with us on weekends. We used to call it Camp Clark. We'd have a couple of kids would come back. We'd have the little fire pit going in the backyard. They'd put the tent up, marshmallows roasting, watching movies, playing video games, just having a, normal, quiet weekend. And I'm involved, because that's part of it. That it can't just be, hanging out with another kid. It has to be, hey, this is important for us to do. As it turns out, the other dad was a guy who was just a good human being who drove a Coca-Cola truck for a living. And so the next year for Little League, he's like, hey, you and I are coaching, man. We're going to do this. And like, all right, let's go. And so we ended up, in this case, staying with a number of those kids for the next year, which was great. And I'm sure that, just that example of a little bit of a, weekend on post had a positive impact on those families. So yeah, we've lived it, in our lives, and
now that
tried to help.
You've seen tons of leaders, right, throughout this time, and you're telling these stories, and people are going to say things like this, yeah, like, okay, easy for you to say, like, what are your thoughts now when you think about, like, you drive down past that post and you say, look at the people sitting by the fire pit, look at those people out there on the coaching those kids on the soccer field, baseball field, whatever it might be. And then look across the street at the barracks at the person holding court up in his office at 1900 with everybody around the table. Yeah. There's a time and a place for everything. Right. Make no mistake. I acknowledge that, right? For those kind of hours and working those things. But what are your thoughts when the people you're talking about that have been the most successful and the ones that have, been the greatest leaders are the ones that are doing the first thing I said?
Right. It's because it's the duality of presence, right? And having the understanding that you have other requirements and responsibilities other than what you're doing at work and in the Army. So what immediately came to mind for me when you talked about holding court at 1900 was, as a new battalion commander, I found that I was dealing with UCMJ actions whenever they would occur to try to move the process along. Mm-hmm. Instead of having a specific date and time on my calendar where we just did that. So we normalized it to Wednesday nights, we're going to perform Red Curry Heat Justice. So just line them up. We'll keep knocking out field grade Article 15s until we don't have any more that night. But they all go on one night. So that way you can tell on the battalion training calendar and on the company training schedules, it's all about building repetitive activities that give everybody decision space. So, and you remember this when you were a battalion commander, always want to know what's on the training schedules, because that you build that in to the normal battle rhythm, rhythm of life for the families and for your soldiers. They know what to expect, because when it's all mystery meat, it creates cortisol and people are nervous and don't know what to do. If you can create the normalcy of 6 weeks out, I'm telling you exactly where you need to be, exactly what we're going to do, exactly what you're going to wear, and exactly how long we're going to be doing it. So then people can plan their lives around that. So we enabled the chain of command in that battalion to plan their lives around, potentially having a Wednesday night, Red Curry Heat Justice session with some kid who's, gone astray with rules and regulations, but it doesn't impact the rest of your week.
Yeah.
So you can plan practice on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, because Wednesday's taken. Yeah. But if you're the coach, you can do both.
Yeah.
But if you're not the coach, you're at you're hoping that you work for somebody that has, alignment in their lives and are not going to have people at the office at 1900 every night.
Yeah, on a whim,
Right.
out of
Right.
just
Without a
based on
plan.
without a plan, whatever happened that day, we'll just go through it and based on what I feel like, kind of.
It's about having priorities.
Yeah.
And for us, it's always been faith, family, friends.
Yeah, because there's a lot of folks that they feel like they don't want to. I don't want to get caught being out there too early.
Right.
I don't want them to see that my car's not in the parking lot right now. If someone drives by and sees that my car's not there,
Well, I
they're
got
going
a
to judge
great
me.
story about that. When I was a new lieutenant, walked down to my company commander's office, same guy that was almost falling out of his run. And I said, "Hey, sir, I'm good for the day. Unless you got something for me, I'm going to go home for the day." And he goes, "Well, the battalion commander hasn't left yet." Like, I don't understand what that has to do with me leaving. I got it. He's important, but he goes, "Well, I can't leave till he leaves." Like, that's weird. Okay. So, and I wasn't alone. I mean, the other lieutenants are behind me,
Yeah.
You go first. So we all go back to our hooch. A couple nights later, I had battalion staff duty. And so in the headquarters at battalion, the commander leaves on foot. He walked home.
Left his car in
Yeah.
the parking lot.
We're going to be here all night, I guess, because my man's car's still here. So I walked back down to the company and I said, "Hey, sir, battalion commander's gone." He goes, "No, he's not. His car's still here." I go, "He walked." He's like, "No." Yes, he walked home. So yeah, but yeah, you don't want to be that person who's not organized, is afraid to ask a question, doesn't want to check things, doesn't want to dig into something, and again, is not aligned with their principles, priorities, and thinking about things the right way. I mean, what are you scared of? Why can't you go home? He asked me, "What are you going to do? You live in the barracks, like BOQ. What are you going to do? Bachelor officer quarters." So I don't know, go eat dinner, listen to some music.
Go exercise.
Yeah, listen
like
to some music. Sit around, play cards with my platoon sergeant, his roommate, my buddy's platoon sergeant, and me. We just not going to do it here. So yeah.
Yeah. So there's the two areas that I kind of want to spend the rest of our time with is, like the secret sauce about what we're doing out here and people partnerships and Prevail.
Yeah.
But I also want to talk about like leader development, and Mike Klepper said in an episode that I did with him, he said that the countries and the militaries that deeply invest in their leader development are the ones that come out on when wartime does kick off.
Exactly.
And the ones that invest the most amount of time in leader development. So those are kind of the two topics.
Leader development's a great place to
Yeah. The leader development thing, the first thing that comes to my mind was when, we've done a lot of LPDs in our career, but the one that stands out to me was when I first showed up to the 25th and you had us read Legacy,
Yeah.
right? And it was going around right there, but it wasn't just the book. Like Legacy's a great book, I get it. But it was the approach at which we went through where we read the book and then we talked about it with other people that we respected,
Right.
and everybody had to kind of contribute to it going forward. When you think of leader development programs, like what are the ones that stood out to you that made you kind of feel like this is what I'm going to do when I have an opportunity to create it?
The reading leader professional developments are a great example of that, Matt. I actually learned to do that when I was the Simon Center director at West Point. We had Commandant's reading group that read books as a part of, the cadets' development. And so one of the books we read was Blackhearts. So we had the author of Blackhearts, James Frederick, come to West Point and talk to us about the book. His thoughts in writing the book, his experiences that are a little bit outside the book. We were able to ask questions, and then we got to sit in small groups with the cadets and talk about the book and how it touches them in their lives and what their takeaways were. So I took that model and brought it to every organization I've been in charge of since then, and that was 2009. So we all read the same book at the same time, which helps because we're all generally competitive. So the discussions around formation or before a meeting, "Hey, Matt, how you finding the book that we're reading? 1 Minute to Think is our book we're getting ready to read for our next LPD here. What do you think about the book? Oh, I think it's great. I'm on chapter 5. Well, I'm on chapter 7. Oh, so you got to up your game. And the conversation that you're having is about the book and about what you're learning from the book and what it means to you and the organization that you're serving in together. So you're having those conversations before PT in the morning, in the afternoon, before you go home waiting on closeout. And it deepens your understanding and enriches the way you pull the lessons from the book, because people are going to see, different nuggets as they're working through it. And then on the conduct of the professional development session, because you've all read the same book, we would try to pull in an author, pull in a character who was in the book so that we can learn from them like we did from James Frederick. And then we break into small groups of 5 or 6 with a facilitator, some person who has a little bit more knowledge because they spent a little time doing some leader training on asking probing questions to drive the discussion. And then in a group of 5 or 6, there's no, as Simon Sinek was saying, lying, hiding, or faking. You have to have read the book. You can't just go, yeah, well, I really like the ending. Well, what was it? So now there's an accountability function to it. So even if people aren't about reading, because there's some who are not, they're going to take away the lessons, and it's going to be a forcing function to read the book for even people who are recalcitrant and don't want to do it. But what it does at the end is you get to talk about in that small group the lessons that apply to our organization, what we can pull together. And you remember from Legacy, we had Bill Keelan, who's a professional rugby player whose nephew was on the All Blacks. So he was able to give us he was our deputy commanding general for interoperability from New Zealand. So he was able to give us a better understanding of what rugby means and the All Blacks mean to the nation. So it would be like all of us having one team. Like we're all New Orleans Saints fans, everybody in every corner of our nation pulling for the Saints. Not, everybody's got their own NASCAR driver. Yeah. We all pull for one person. And it's in the fabric of who they are. It's a national identity. So having that kind of context as we're reading the book and understanding more deeply what sweeping the sheds means in Legacy, it's the entirety of the LPD that really pulls it all together, and making it matter for the people who are in that formation with you is the key. And then it's repeatable. So you can take that same book as a brigade commander, battalion commander, and use it in an LPD for your own subordinates, which you did as a battalion commander. It's really it's a good way to continue to educate leaders inside of our formations, because as we talk about all the time, there's 3 pillars in the Greek temple of leader development. It's education, training, and experience. Start with training. We train for the known, the problems we know we're going to have to solve. We know we're going to have to go into an urban area and fight. So Battle Drill 6, inner building, clear room. We know we're going to have to do that, so we train. As an example, education is to help us to solve problems that we don't know we have yet, or are unknown or unknowable. And then experience is what we gain along the way. So those 3 things really hold up, again, that Greek temple that is leader development. And it's all on a bedrock of character, right? So you want to do it the right way. The experience that you gain through education, which is what the leader professional development session is really rich and really valid. And again, I think the fact that it's repeatable makes it even more important.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because each step along the way. I mean, I just had this conversation a couple days ago with all the captains, and they talked about what was the most impactful, LPD that you've been a part of. We do like a round table where we got them all together, and it seems kind of ad hoc, but at the same time, when you do it over and over and over, they're now starting to kind of get get the feel for, I can come into this once a month thing and we're going to talk about what's going on in the world right now, whatever's on our mind, because we've gone past it. It was LPD that we had talked about how to run one, which ones had impactful. The thing I added was that it's when the LPD applies to something I'm about to go and do. So I can take what we learned and apply it. We're getting ready to go to the CTC. We're getting ready to go to JRTC. Well, one of our LPDs was about, the preparation for how to do it. We did the tactical decision exercises, right, with every one of the platoons. And so it gave everybody an opportunity to learn something, but then to apply, they're about to go apply in the future. And when we went to JRTC, they were like, "Sir, I felt like we knew the terrain left, right, up and down, because we had done it so many times before." And that was the whole point. It's not just leader development to do it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Two things come to mind with that. The first is, you remember the requirement in the training guidance to teach and train character, competence will follow. So to demand that we have a moral ethical component to the decisions that have to be made in training is important, because it can't be, it's difficult if the first time you're making a decision in combat, it's, from a baseline of 0. So you don't know, you haven't had an opportunity to train for the known, because you're going to have these situations that are, shoot, don't shoot. The decision that the lieutenant has to make in a moment of extremis in the crucible, you've got to set conditions as a leader to ensure that, again, that voice I talked about earlier, that they have enough touch points in their experience base based on the training for the known situations they're going to be in, that they hear your voice, that they hear, as a battalion commander, they hear your voice. For company commanders, as brigade commander, they hear your voice 2 levels down. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you talked about leader development in units that are, our highest quality units for something that is, potentially ahead of you. So the example I thought of there was, when I was a battalion commander, we knew that we were going to Iraq and we'd be in some sort of urban fight. So what would keep me up at night was, how do I train to standard commingled units? So in other words, when you conduct training, especially live fires, you have to have your organic squad to limit the risk based on the fact that you're firing ball ammunition. You need to have the right leaders in place with the right soldiers all qualified on their weapons to be able to undertake whatever that training is. The risk is too high to even conduct the training. But in combat, no one's going to ask you for your alpha roster, and you're going to have some dudes that show up from scouts, or a couple of guys from Charlie Company. The SEAL team had 3 guys that ended up showing up here. Get them in here.
Yeah.
So how do you baseline everybody with how we fight in a way that limits the risk to force? We're the most dangerous people to ourselves sometimes, because we don't understand in the fog of war where my dude to my left and right is. So the way we mitigated that risk in first of the 506 was that we developed a MOUT SOP. We brought in an external, organization to help us train and build this SOP. And the first people that we put, through this certification were all squad leaders and above. So it was all squad leaders, platoon sergeants, platoon leaders, company commanders were all in the shoot house, all going through, all the steps, crawl, walk, run,
like
day, night.
Privates and sergeants.
Exactly. So that if you do get all the, and we standardized it at battalion level. So you don't have, Bravo Company, we like to keep the saw outside the room because you never know. No, we don't. So don't want to get all the way down and attack the weeds.
Here.
Right. So you don't get to make that decision.
Yeah.
Based on the conditions, we do this.
Yeah.
But we're going to go path least resistance. We're not going to go left, right, left, because there may be a dresser, or there may be, you know what I mean?
I do.
Or,
yes.
So maybe an obstacle. So we standardized it. We trained the leaders on the SOP first, and then tweaked it because there were some things that didn't fit. And then we trained everybody,
Yeah.
to include our forward support company, because they're going to end up in it too. And they're probably going to be the people who make contact first, while they're out on some convoy or
If the enemy knows what they're doing,
exactly.
that's the people they're going to attack first.
Yeah, their actions are pretty well scripted. So again, you train those leaders, and that's what lead units do. Is they invest in leader development, and they train the leaders first, so that those leaders can then standardize that training across their formation to, again, limit risk to force.
What do you think about the difference between, people talk about coaching, people talk about mentoring, they call it about developing leaders. What's the difference between mentoring, coaching, and kind of leader development?
Okay, good question. Mentoring, I think, is a very unique personal and professional relationship between someone with greater knowledge and someone with lesser knowledge, where there's an interchange of information and ideas on both a personal and professional level. So the number of people you can mentor is limited. Mm-hmm. Coaching you can do on a broader scale. And that's a person who has knowledge and can impart that knowledge on a group of people to improve their performance. Mm-hmm. And then leader development is the system by which you encapsulate all of that. I would offer, we both coach all the time, but the number of people you mentor, that's kind of tied to the contacts in your iPhone.
Yeah.
If they're not in there, you're probably not their mentor. I've talked about this a bunch of times with different people. I was doing interviews to hire an aide de camp when I was in 82nd. And so I sat down with this young lieutenant, and one of the questions I ask is, who's your mentor? And what important things have they imparted to you in your life? And he kind of smiled and he said, "Sir, you are my mentor." I said, I don't think so. And he goes, "But sir, you are." I go, "Let me define mentor for you. Personal and professional relationship. I don't remember, we've not met." He goes, "Oh, sir, we have. I just failed out of Ranger School. I was in the Starbucks on Custer Road because I thought, where can I go to hide? Because I'm ashamed. I'm going to the 82nd without a Ranger tab. Like, how am I going to get on with my life? And what's my next move?" He said, "And you walked in, you ordered a black coffee, you looked over and saw me in the corner trying to hide. You walked over and said, 'Hey, Lieutenant, why are you in Starbucks at 10 in the morning?' I was on my way back from Main Post to Sand Hill. What? After a meeting. I go, 'Why are you in here?' He goes, 'Sir, I just failed out of Ranger School.' I said, 'When are you going back?' He goes, 'Sir, I'm not going back. I'm going to 82nd. I said, 'I know you're going to 82nd. So I'm asking you now, when are you going back?' And he goes, 'Sir, I haven't thought about it.' I go, 'You need to, and you'll do okay. It was easier for me the second time.'
Yeah.
And then I walked off, got my coffee and left. What I didn't tell him was that the second time I was part of cadre, I only went through Ranger School once, and it was without recycle. But he said, 'I heard your voice. It's not that hard. I made it through the second time.' Yeah. It was easier the second time. So super funny. But he's like, 'Yeah, sir, you may have not thought you were having a personal relationship with me, but you did in one engagement.' And so, I hired him. He was great. And now I actually am a mentor to him. But again, it's a personal and professional relationship where both people are invested for mentorship. So it's a little bit deeper tie to it than a coaching relationship where you can coach a number of people. Yeah. I would offer that the conversation that we had at Starbucks was coaching.
Yeah. Yes.
But the relationship we have now is mentorship.
And I like to, the mentoring is often people make a decision, but on both sides, in an agreement that we're going to kind of
buy in.
Mentoring. The coaching is you don't always get to pick who your coach is.
The coach may be terrible.
Whoever's in charge is the coach at times. The coach on the side of the field, kind of calling in the plays is the coach. And the leader development is sometimes kind of the game in itself.
Right.
Everything, kind of we've been doing for the last hour or so, but is, we talk about strengthening the Army profession, and there's a lot of different ways that we can go about it through leader development, through the training, putting folks in through a CTC, putting them out in there in the box, taking them to the range. writing a paper. There's a lot of different ways that we can strengthen the Army profession.
Yeah.
What do you think are a couple of the areas that are helping us strengthen the Army profession right now the most?
Sure. I'd go to the priorities in this theater: people, partnerships, and prevail. We talked earlier about people being the centerpiece of all we do. We're a people-centric service. We don't put people on equipment. We put equipment on people. We invest in our people through leader development. It's eyeball-to-eyeball contact. It's the human interaction between human beings that gets things done in the Army. So if people are the priority, you have to invest in them. And part of that is the development of leaders and to train and educate those in your charge to standard to be able to meet the missions and tasks that are assigned. Partnerships are absolutely vital. And for us in this region, and really for the Army writ large, we've never gone into any conflict alone. We've always had partners and allies at our side in the business of defending our country and our way of life, and that won't change. In this region, 36 countries, 18 time zones, 52% of the Earth's surface, 60% of the Earth's population, 25% of the Earth's landmass, despite this theater being characterized by water. The people are essential, and the partnerships are vital because 2 out of every 3 chiefs of defense in this region are Army officers. Because some of our partners don't even have navies or air forces, and if they do, they're small. And they're more about the littorals and their territorial waters than they are to be able to conduct any kind of maritime operations that are outside of their own locality. So the relationships that we develop over time matter, and it has to happen early. It can't be after we cross the line of departure. Now I'm trying to figure out whether I can trust you. It is way too late.
Yeah.
So we have to build those relationships on a bedrock of trust through our operations, activities, and investments across the theater. Operation pathways, where we deploy units forward inside the first and second island chain with partners and allies at the invitation of sovereign governments to train together to address any threats that are necessary. So we assure allies and deter adversaries across this region. So together, we get that done.
Yeah.
So we focus on that. And then prevail, we have no other choice. That's our mission, to fight and win our nation's wars. That is why we are a profession. That, professions all have the same unique characteristics. And one of them is that you possess an expert knowledge and capability that is of service to society. And for us, as the guardians of freedom, as the folks who defend our nation and our way of life and that of our allies and partners, that is what we are uniquely educated and trained to do and resourced to do. So we must prevail. There is no other choice.
Yeah. Well, sir, I want to say thank you, because the things that you just said in the last 3 minutes, like those have been the same things that you've said consistently since the day that you came in. When you first came in, we did the commander's conference, right? At the end, you pulled up this one slide and it was so simple. And it just said that people prevail in partnerships, right? But it had just a couple things below it, and you showed it, and we were writing down feverishly about what those each of those things were and how would we achieve it. But your consistency has been something that has been like a bedrock. It hasn't changed every month or two. I think a lot of folks can learn from that, the consistency at which you've gone. The things you started this whole conversation with that you hoped that people would be, you've kind of demonstrated that for us, not just this year, last year, the year before, over time. A great way to look at it is people that do what they say they're going to do, and the things that you've been doing out here for us are doing what they say. Do you have any last advice for those of us that are moms and dads, sisters and brothers, something that not necessarily all Army, but like what advice do you have for kind of that population as we get ready to wrap this thing up?
Sure. Advice for families and really for leaders in our formations, we have to focus on what's really important, right? Keep the main thing the main thing. And a lot of times we get wrapped up in service, and that's important. Service in uniform, wear the cloth of the nation is a privilege. But at some point, we're all going to have to take it off. The things that we've done while in uniform to sustain those relationships with our families and with our friends have to endure. So in other words, I'm sure as I'm sitting here that any of us that decide, at some point to retire, whether the decision's made by us or by the institution, that it is time. There's going to be some sort of ceremony. If it's a ceremony here on Palm Circle, the band will be present. There will be speeches given. There will be lay presented. And then you'll leave, hopefully with your family. But if you've not done the things to sustain those relationships with your families and friends over time, then that's not the right message to send. And that's really not the right situation that you'd want to be in. So you've got to do the things while you're in uniform, while you're in service to sustain those relationships that over time will endure. Not that your service won't endure. You'll be a veteran. You can continue to serve your community. You continue to do all those things. But the business of serving in uniform will end.
Yeah.
So take the time while you have it to invest it in your family and friends. The best piece of advice I ever received as a senior leader was stay connected with your friends. Those who've come up through the ranks with you, because they'll think you're too busy to reach out to you. Oh, he's the commanding general of USERPAC. He doesn't have time. I really want to call him, check on him, see how he's doing, but he doesn't have time. So I call them. I meet with the same 4 people for dinner every time I go to DC. It's 2 of my roommates from West Point and a guy who was my high school and West Point classmate. And the 4 of us get together for dinner every time I go to DC without fail. If somebody's missing, we just drive on with it.
Yeah.
It could be 2 of us, 3 of us, 4 of us, but we drive. Sometimes we invite an additional person or 2, but it's always that core 4. And what it does for you is it keeps you grounded. Hopefully those people are cut from the same kind of character cloth that you are. And they help you remember what's important. So I'd offer that. I'd also say that you've got to continue to pull as you climb. And that's, as you continue to do things as a parent, as you continue to do things as a leader, as a soldier, as a civilian, whatever those things are, take teammates with you that you see that have the potential to continue to do things and grow. The most important things I think you can do as a parent, again, is invest in your kids and spend that time with them. Now I'm a grandparent, so it's a different ball game. Not that being a parent isn't awesome. Being a grandparent is like times 10. So again, being present in the life of, little Emma is super important to Simona and I. And we're going to do what's necessary in the time we have to spend time with her. And hopefully, she'll appreciate all the love. So I say that, again, as a person who's blessed to have had that opportunity. But the thing I'd also say is that I'm super proud of you and your podcast and your leadership outside of this venue, but with your soldiers and families. And the example that you and your family have set for all of them. The pride that I have in you. I wish this was not just an audio podcast and people could see how proud I am of you and what you're doing to continue to pull as you climb to people you may never meet that have an opportunity to hear the conversations that you're having with people you chose to have conversations with because you thought it would be beneficial to others. And for that, I really appreciate this time with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast because, I'm a fan.
Well, if there was a video right now, they'd see me. I'd be about to unplug. I'll turn the power off and unplug if you keep going in that direction. So I'm awkwardly appreciative of what you just said. It made me a little uncomfortable, for even thinking about that. Thanks for you for showing us the way. Thanks for you pulling as you climb, remembering what's important, focusing on what's most important around here, spending a few minutes, not just sharing this with me, because we're going to share it with everybody that's out there so they can all benefit from the things that you've been sharing with not just me, but everybody that's been fortunate enough to have you as a leader. So thanks for spending so much time with me today.
Mahalo, Matt.
Thanks for listening today. I hope we sparked some thoughts about the people that have inspired you to be who you are today. I hope you share some of your thoughts and better yet demonstrate them for the people in your life. Our pursuit is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories stacked on top of each other, building like compound interest. Keep stacking these positive habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. Please share your comments at the links in the show notes and DM us at Teach Me to Fish podcast on Instagram or Facebook. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky on your mind.